It's something, the film that I made before is a really complex story about two people who, there are parts of them that are very guilty, and with this, I don't know, I was facing a much more binary story. I think we're dealing with pretty primal forces of right and wrong in this story. So there's a very clear kind of moral question at the centre of the film, and the scale of it's extraordinary. The scale of the operation. It's a very difficult film to make, just in terms of managing the amount of information in it. But that was a challenge too, and it was frightening. Frightening film to take on. And when Joel told me about it, I wasn't sure that I could manage it. But it was a provocation. Yeah.
Well, initially, when I read the story that is the foundation of this film, it was in a news article, and then that drew me to the book, and I was so fascinated, but I was fascinated by the story, and that fascination sustained a long period of time. I couldn't stop thinking about it and talking about it, and I knew that there was value with the right sensitivity to make a movie about it. And initially I had to ask myself a question whether I would be able or capable of doing that myself, until I came across Thomas, and through our encounter he told me he was off to make his first film, and I was like, please show me when you're finished. And that was more out of pure curiosity than anything else. And when I saw that film, Acute Misfortune, and how he handled the relationships between the two men in that film, and every confident aspect of that piece of cinema, it's like, oh, this guy is so much more qualified than me to make that film, and to make that film in the most unobvious way that this story could be made, and would allow me to be within the frame and to concentrate on that. And I'm so pleased with the journey so far, and that we're here. And everything that Thomas wrestled with in coming to even the beginning of taking this project on, and the sensitivity with which he handled it, and the willingness to go into the darker aspects of it in a really different kind of way. Everything has lined up with those early conversations, and now here we are, and it feels like something we're incredibly, we feel is very sacred, and we're very proud of where it's landed.
It's not easy material to deal with, and the challenge of the film as a writer-director was framing something like this that had a strong moral sense, but was also unflinching about human violence, but that also existed as a film, and something that asked people to lean in, to lean closer, to invest personally, to want to take part in and go deeper with the film. I think it's a challenging film, but it's certainly not an abusive film whatsoever. I think it's a film that invites the audience in, and I think Sean's impression was a big part of that. But it really did take us to some very, very dark and difficult places during the making of the film, and what it called on from Sean. If I can just say really quickly, because I think it's probably even difficult for Sean to talk about, and Joel too, was a level of commitment that allowed them to disappear, and created an environment where they could let go and go to places where they didn't know what was going to happen, and that did feel dangerous, and where we couldn't have anticipated the outcome of some of those scenes or moments or.
It was you never knew. I didn't know that I was going to arrive with Henry until I stepped on set, really. But I had the luxury of having the script and being with Henry for a year, because we were going to film, and then the film was pulled because of COVID, and then I had to sit with Henry for a longer, because I started to grow the hair, the beard, and so I was with it for about maybe 12 months or something before
you even got there. Yeah.
And then when I got there, I was in quarantine for 14 days. So I was in a hotel room on my own, and Henry started to really come alive then. They were shipping in costume for me, and I was starting to pick costume because I wasn't able to do costume fitting. And I started to really start to feel Henry then in the isolation of those rooms. I started to, Thomas sent me in some music, Henry music, that would make me, and I was listening to that a lot. And I started to do these little videos of Henry, the birth of Henry in a sense. And I would do them in the bathroom, and I would do these dances and some quite provocative, intimate sort of things, and then send them to Thomas. And that was really me saying, this is who you're going to meet, and this is what's coming alive. And it was a very, very interesting preparation, because I've never been put in quarantine before. I've never had to, but that was a real bonus for me. And then because you're in quarantine, you used to have the police would come to your door every day to check that you hadn't, I don't know, jumped off the balcony or anything like that. So I used to start. I was like, okay, they're not going to meet Sean, they're going to meet Henry. So I started to talk to them. I just use it as an acting exercise. And it got very, very interesting how the police would handle this guy, and how far I started to go, how far can I push this? How far can I really push this? And it was interesting. It was silly of me, but I couldn't resist it. But so yeah, it was. But then when we started to film it, when we started to roll, it was all pretty much there. Yeah.
But Joel had a different, a different thing to deal with there as the person who'd found the material and as one of the producers and a person with a lot of responsibility. And our relationship was so close, and those conversations have been going for over 2 years by the time we started filming. And I think the thing there was trying to make sure there was an environment there where you felt that you could let go of all those other responsibilities as well, and let yourself fall.
Yeah. Producing a film for me was about getting everybody together and then letting everybody, smarter people than me, handle producing things. But one thing I will say about this film is it's a film that deals with so much violence, and yet one of the great things about how Thomas has rendered the film, the script that came out of that book, is that the violence is always looming, but it's not a film that's dripping with violent action within the film. Some of the most violent moments are moments that are just simply the potential for violence. Even Sean's dance in that scene halfway through the film feels like it's something that happens that could be followed by sexual or physical violence towards me. That is what I love about this film. It's not confronting it's not something to be confronted with constant a barrage of physical violence, but this promise or danger that violence is always.
In fact,
around.
There's no violence in the film whatsoever. There's no violence.